Hello, Formula One fans, and welcome to Fans Forum, the show, of course, where we put you guys in pole position, driving the conversation as myself and my VIP co-host gets into all the action from what was another McLaren masterclass that was the Spanish Grand Prix. And for this show, my VIP co-host is none other than the man himself, Henry, aka the Haas chap, and there he is. We're going to be delving into everything that happened, and I know it wasn't a great weekend for his boys, but at the same time in the chat box, we want to know what you made of it with those alternative strategies. So let us know in the comments box. If you've got any questions from myself or my VIP co-host, pose them to us. We want to give you our opinions just as much as well. And once again, our unofficial co-host, Gary, is in the chat box. So, Gaz, a big thank you for the support as always. But listen, Henry, the Haas chap, it's great to have you here, my man. First and foremost, how are you? And thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening.
Oh, well, no, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm not doing too bad. For my job, every day this week I've been having to wake up at about 3:30 in the morning, and tomorrow morning is no different. So it's been a pretty tiring week for work and looking after my son and all sorts. But you know, generally I've been pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, listen, bud, we really appreciate you jumping on. And I know it's a different day as per usual, and it's a slightly later time, and you are up. Are you up again tomorrow at 3:30 p.m.? I think a.m. Sorry, I think you were saying to me, or was it the fact that you got up at 3:30 this morning?
Sorry, say again. All of that just went completely gobbledygook.
Are you up at 3:30 a.m. again tomorrow as well?
Yeah, I am tomorrow. Yeah, up at 3:30 tomorrow.
Well, we better not waste any time then, matey, and begin and get into it. Now, listen, I've caught your content online and I love it. And I guess a lot of people out there will want to know, firstly, where your love affair with F1 actually begun. And secondly, why Team Haas for you as the Haas chap? So let us know, Henry.
Well, that's probably the question I get asked the most is why do I support Haas? Well, I first started watching Formula One in about 2003, 2004, watching it alongside one of my older brothers. And, you know, it was the Schumacher era, Barrichello era. You know, there was a lot of things that were coming up. There was the Alonso Button was, you know, doing his thing. And it was the rise of Sir Lewis Hamilton and Braun GP and all that sort of stuff. So that's where my love of Formula One first began. Fell away during university. I didn't really have the time or the money to be able to pay out for things like Sky. And then I kind of came back into it in about 2016-ish. And that just so happened to tie in to Haas joining the grid. I had developed a very strong love of the WRC when I was at school. And Gunther Steiner, the man that we all very well know now, was involved in the world of rallying. He was the chief mechanical engineer for Colin McRae and for Carlos Sainz Sr. So when Haas came on the scene, and I had heard that it was Gunther Steiner, a name that I had previously associated with the world of rallying, I just kind of put two and two together. And then after a year or so, I was ready to be like, yeah, okay, I'm actually going to, for the first time, put my name to a team. And I've just stuck with Haas ever since. I love an underdog. I like the fact that there's only about 300 members of staff across the entirety of the team. I love the sheer dogged determination, and I love the sort of very small, tight-knit family culture that they've got going on.
And listen, the universe, the gift that just keeps on giving. Of course, then Drive to Survive was launched as a series, and who was the star of that series on Netflix?
You know, it would be foolish for me to deny the fact that Drive to Survive had no impact on Haas or their reputation or their awareness, because I'm fairly certain without that show, it would have been another team that kind of died its death, unless the show, you know, came along. And, you know, thank God it did, because now there's, you know, at least a dozen Haas fans across the world that I can have a chat with, which is nice. It's good. A lot of people talk about how Drive to Survive can be like pretty diminutive of the sport, and it can really like dumb it down. But really, what are we all here for? We're here for entertainment. Okay, racing, you might be somebody who wants to have like the purity of the motorsport retains. You want to have, the aggressive driving. You want to have this, you want to have that, and you don't want to necessarily see all of the more commercially side. But Formula One's been commercial for ever since its inception, effectively. So having Drive to Survive and bringing the awareness of the sport and the ability and the availability of the sport to as many people as possible, I think can only be a good thing.
And who didn't enjoy those episodes when Gunter and Mick Schumacher were doing all kinds of crazy sponsorship deals? And that is the underlying factor of the world of Formula One as well. And then so you've got to embrace every element of it. And Formula One itself evolved, and it needed to be a soap opera to a certain extent to attract a new audience, right?
Absolutely. And it's, again, like I said, Haas wouldn't really be here, I don't think, unless Drive to Survive had, stepped into the paddock and Haas had welcomed them in. Gunter was very good for allowing this crew to kind of come in and see the behind the scenes, because not only did we get to see, how things worked a little bit more in detail, but you got to see more of the personality of not just the drivers, but of the team principals and of the mechanics and the people within the sport, as an everyday sort of thing. And, I think it's obviously been divisive, but I personally don't think that the sport would have gone on as well as it has done without Drive to Survive.
And talking about yourself personally as well, Henry, the opportunities that it's afforded you, and you mentioned about your job, but you've now got this whole new persona and avenue that you're exploring yourself. None of that would have happened without the success of Haas, would it?
No, it really wouldn't. And I had been looking up to see if there were any podcasts that were dedicated or that were supported by people who supported Haas. So there was this one podcast that I found on Spotify called The Haas Boys, and they were really funny. There was three of them: Mike, Max, and Parker. They wanted people to like jump in and ask questions, so I just DM'd them saying, "Hey, I'm a Haas fan from the UK." They read that out, invited me on the show like a few weeks later, and then it was after that that I took the decision to say, you know what, this is something that I've studied. I studied film at university. I could take what I know with film and TV and distribution and apply it to myself and to something that I think has like a real USP to it.
Get that spark going again.
And here we are. And where it's landed me, it's kind of mad, the sort of things that I've done. And I do count myself exceptionally lucky that I have got to do these things, because there's a lot of people that would pay a lot of money and probably do a lot of dubious deeds to get to the sort of thing that I've been able to do. But I've never lost sight of the fact that I am just a fan. I'm not doing this as a job. I don't have the ins and outs. I don't have the time to be able to give to this, like as much time as I'd like to be able to give to this. But what I have been able to do has been unbelievable. And I can't thank anybody but the people who hopefully are watching this tonight, listening later on, or follow my pages on Instagram and TikTok, really.
Yeah, shout out Juggernaut Joe. There is saying a great chat, and he discovered us here at Fans Forum courtesy of you, the Haas chap, Henry. So thanks for that. And yeah, you've got a following now, my man. So make sure that you capitalize on it. But listen, Henry, let's turn our attention to all of the action around the Spanish Grand Prix. What did you make of it generally as a spectacle and as entertainment? And let me pose the first question by asking, did you expect it to be a little less dominant from McLaren, because there was all this focus around the new front wing regs, wasn't there? We dealt with a flexi wing at the beginning of the season from the rear of the car, and this was the Grand Prix that it was supposed to even it out. but that didn't happen. It was a dominant display via McLaren.
It really was. Overall, I thought the Spanish Grand Prix was fine. It wasn't anything particularly spectacular for the most part. The issues that have been surrounding like the flexi wings, if you were to take the percentages of an advantage from a flexi wing over a more rigid wing, from one team having a flexi one and one having a more rigid, there's obviously going to be a clear difference. But the fact that rule then applied to everybody kind of meant that these gaps and these advantages didn't change really all that much. Because if that logic has applied to one car, then the same logic is going to apply to every single other car. So the gaps aren't going to be so wild. What's going to be changing is what we see in every other race weekend. It's going to be the setup. It's going to be the temperature. It's going to be the choice of tyres. It's going to be, how alert are the drivers that day. It's the flexi wing thing was clearly something to curb a perceived advantage, but it kind of hasn't really done anything for the gappage. It might have made the cars a bit slower overall, maybe, but not by very much. So it's...
Yeah, Gary kind of backs it up with you there, my man, just saying he thought that they'd make more of a difference to the other teams, but not to McLaren. And the point you've made, it was all kind of relative. They've all been slowed down by the same amount. And maybe it is that magic that McLaren have in the tyre management. And we'll get into that a little later. But, of course, we've got the Haas chap on. So we've got to start with a bit of focus on your team, Henry. It wasn't the greatest weekend, was it, for the American outfit Haas? So let's talk a little bit possibly about the first third of the season then. What have you made of the performance, the combination of Esteban Ocon and Oliver Bearman so far this season? And, of course, Ao Komatsu at the helm.
You know what? I have been very pleasantly surprised with the pairing. I think we all, coming into this season, knew that Ollie Bearman was going to be a good fit because he had stepped in for K-Mag twice last year and he had stepped in for Carlos Sainz as well. We knew that he was going to be gelling well because he had already kind of ingratiated himself within the team already. But of course, the big sort of cloud of suspicion was over Esteban Ocon and the perceived reputation that he had with teammates. And as a good friend of mine, Jesse Billington, made a very good point after Monaco last year to say that Esteban Ocon and his relationship to his teammates, that he keeps crashing into them and having disagreements. The only measure of how he is against somebody in equal machinery is going to be his teammate. So, of course, the person who's going to get potentially the flat end of Esteban's tongue or, his steering rack is going to be his teammate. That's clearly obvious. What seemed to be way more apparent at the end of last year is that Esteban was seemingly poorly treated by the upper management of Alpine, and I think unjustly booted him out before the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. I think it just showed like a real contempt. I mean, my opinions on Flavio Briatore, you'd probably be able to find them somewhere on the internet. I'm not the biggest fan of that particular individual. But they seem to be working really well. The Bearcon thing is something that, I think has slotted in well to the team. And as far as I'm aware from the people that I know, that, it's quite a homogenous and happy and peaceful sort of existence for the pair of them. I think they've both done well. Ocon's obviously done really well in...
Buddy, were you a little bit surprised that the pairing was completely changed from 2024, considering you'd had your best season in about, I want to say, was it about 6 or 7 years?
Oh, since 2018, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so were you surprised that they both went?
I was a little bit surprised that that K-Mag departed. I think he's probably ended up at like a little bit happier as a result of it, having gone over to do endurance racing with BMW, because he's getting to spend a bit more time with his kids. and I think he doesn't really want to necessarily continue with the circus for too much longer. He's still supposedly listed as a reserve driver for Haas, which I don't disbelieve, but I think there's going to be some other elements from a newer sponsor that have probably got a little bit more influence over that. So, I mean, I was a little bit surprised that K-Mag went, but you know what? I'm actually really glad that we've ended up with the pair that we've got, because they've done us really well so far, surprisingly, considering all of the hate that SD was getting at the beginning.
Yeah, Zane making the point that he feels that Ocon's one of the most skilled drivers on the track and would love to see him in a decent seat. And Gary backing that up was saying, what about the Red Bull second seat? I mean, we'll get on to the curse of the second seat at Red Bull in a little while. But yeah, Ocon, possibly a bit of a coup for your team as well. You know, coming through the Mercedes Junior program, race winner, of course, as well. Were you surprised that you managed to pull it off as a team?
You know what? I think people kind of give Haas a little bit more of a disservice than is deserved, because I think we managed to get Nico Hulkenberg, who I think everybody had kind of discounted as kind of basically retired, or you know, the super sub that he wasn't going to do anymore. And I mean, look at the results that he gave us. He effectively put us in P7. We got the Schumacher name. You know, I don't know how many people, you know, Alfa Romeo were gunning to get Mick, and despite his torrid time at Haas, we managed to get the Schumacher name back into Formula One, and then propel his career to where it's now gone, which seems to have way more success than what he did. The success bit probably was down to a little bit of management issues, I think, and not necessarily understanding where Mick wanted to go. But nevertheless, I think the fact that we got Esteban out of, you know, the Mercedes and Alpine camp and over to the Haas and the Ferrari side, I think showed not only that we could do something like that, but that Esteban was kind of getting tired of this whole thing. And I think that could be potentially said for a couple of other drivers up and down the grid as to where they are.
And taking a look at where your team currently stands in the constructors. So P7, so that's maintaining where they finished last year, as we said, their best result in some time. Is it realistic, perhaps, that Haas could look at a best of the rest up in and around Williams, or do you think that they possibly sealed that and it's a P6 at best for Haas this season?
I think honestly the lowest that we'd be is P8. I would be surprised if we got best of the rest. I'd take it, don't get me wrong. But I think unless Williams is going to cap their development this year and retain it for 2026, I'm struggling to see how we get to that point. We might get to where they are in points wise, but I can see Williams and their trajectory and the driver lineup that they've got going further than where they are points wise currently. So I would like to say P6 would be great because it's an improvement on last year. If we retain this P7, amazing. If we get P8, I don't think it's the end of the world, because then we get a little bit more time for next year. But we definitely can't get any lower than P8, really, because 26 is probably our best shot at getting the best of the rest, I would say, at this point.
All right, bud. So that's a roundup of the team closest to your heart. Now let's focus in on those that are currently leading the way in both championships. The Papaya Army, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, the McLaren boys, that seem to be back-to-back rotating race wins at the moment, seemingly unstoppable to a certain extent. Looking at their performance across this weekend, they led all sessions across race weekend. It was the biggest pole margin, I believe, between first and then the next competitive team, which would have been Max in P3 in the Red Bull. What have you made of McLaren, and did you expect them to be as dominant this weekend as they were?
I mean, McLaren. I mean, hats off to them because they found the winning formula. They've obviously discovered what it is about their car and how that relates to their drivers that works, and that works for both drivers. That doesn't just side with one or t'other. I think I was expecting this level of domination. I had made some predictions earlier in this year to say that McLaren have got it because that they've carried that momentum and that positivity and that attitude into this year, and they definitely want to be going into a season, a regs change with the biggest, broadest shoulders possibly going. So I'm not surprised that they've maintained their momentum. 0.2 of a second gap is amazing. That's the biggest that we've had this year. How we've got to a point where 0.2 of a second is the largest gap from pole to P2. You know, if you're speaking about that, like even like 5 years ago, that would be outrageous. Like that would seem ridiculously close. But now we're in this point. I think it's just a testament to show how hard McLaren have worked. They've done really well, and I can't really fault them. Really, I don't think anybody could.
Is it a shame slightly, perhaps, that we're going to have a new regs reset because this grid is converging so much and it's so tight, like you've just said. It feels a shame that if we start with new cars next year, and then all of a sudden you've got the grid split by maybe a second and a half, you're like, oh, hang on, it's not competitive again. What are your thoughts or feelings on that? Do you want to see competition, or are you?
I think if it was up to me, what I'd probably do is I would probably extend the number of years that a technical reg would long for. It's like 5 years, something like that. I might extend it to like 7 or 8 years so that you can get as much as physically possible out of the regulations, because clearly, or maybe even make it a decade so you can have it as like nicely packaged. 2010 to 2020 is this, and then 2011 to 2020 is blah. That I think that's how I would do it. I would probably extend the technical regs. It is a shame, but at the same time, there are some necessities that need to come forward. The cars need to start to get smaller. The engines need to start getting more and more efficient. Some of these things are a necessity, and whether or not something's called DRS or something called MOM, like who cares, right? It doesn't really matter. But so long as the racing remains close as it is now, a shame that it wasn't at the beginning of these regs, but we've now got to this point, thankfully, where it is much more exciting. We just need to get rid of the dirty air out the back thing. Really, how they do that, I don't know. Whether or not they say all cars have to have this geometry at the back and make from the back of the engine cover to the rear, to the very end of the rear axle as spec, like you can't deviate from this. I don't know whether or not they'd enforce something that can't be changed through a loophole or something, just to maintain the excitement and the on track battles, And
of course, there's that big net zero target with more electrical energy being used from next year and 100% sustainable man-made fuel from the laboratory. So it's going to be interesting to see the cars on that. Henry, Gary makes a really good point about they're the only team with 2 top cars, McLaren. They've got a great driver pairing. Talk to me and give me your opinions, Henry, on the driver pairing. Again, surprised that it's Piastri leading the way in the papaya. And what have you made of Lando Norris's attempts at battling him? Because, of course, the big headlines at the beginning of the season was Lando taking the challenge to Max, but it's the other side of the garage that's done so.
Honestly, I'm not surprised. Norris is a damn good driver, but so is Piastri. And I think you can clearly see in the way that Norris kind of handles himself when he has struggles that it does clearly get to him. He wears his heart on his sleeve. Whereas Piastri has very much, been taken under the wing of Mark Webber. You can quite clearly tell that he doesn't want to show any signs of weakness whatsoever, because even something like watching somebody else's interview is gonna set a thought process in their mind about how you conduct yourself. And like we saw in Monza last year, Piastri is not afraid to take it to Norris. Norris has been there for a little while now, but Piastri has got every right to be just as there as he does. And he's proving it. He's proving that he's clearly capable. I'm not surprised. I'm really rooting for him. But that's also not to say that I don't want Norris to win. Either of them would be absolutely, fine in my book. Norris clearly would earn it through the years and the loyalty that he's taken to McLaren. And Piastri, has shown how quickly he can develop and mature as a driver. He equally deserves a championship. So I'm not surprised, and I'm glad that they're getting this, really.
Surprised possibly that Piastri is making a championship challenge so early in his career, and also has that acceleration happened because of the whole Mark Webber experience at Red Bull? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it does. I think clearly Mark Webber, he went through some hardships with his F1 career. When he was teammates with Seb Vettel, there was clearly a lot of animosity at times on track and, inside the garage, with regards to, the famous Multi-21 thing, or one of the most unfortunate and most talented Formula One drivers to not win a world championship. I think Mark's awareness of how the sport works and the fact that he's been in that position as a number two can probably give a lot more of a beneficial understanding of how to approach that than what Lando can do, because Lando effectively has been the number one for some time. I think it's just good. That's really as much as I can say. It's just good to see these two so close. If it was one going away with it, like romping away with it, if it was Norris or Piastri like sailing off into the sunset, I'd be a little bit less enthusiastic about it. But the fact that it is so close between the two of them, I think is praise to the decisions that McLaren have been making so far to give us good entertainment.
How far away is it before we see the locking of horns between these two teammates, do you think?
I think we're going to get to the last 6 races. I think we're going to do like race 18 or race 20, and then it's going to start to really get nasty, potentially, where Lando, like Max, has a bit of a red mist, or he gets down on himself and he makes a mistake. And I'm not going to say like that Lando's a bold job, because have you ever tried driving?
Oh, buddy, we've lost you a bit there. 1 second. It feels like it needs to recalibrate.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to pretty close. Probably not to the last race, but
we lost you for about 10 seconds there, buddy, and it went a bit robotic our end. But you mentioned about the last 6 races, and then you said Lando, there's going to be some kind of mistake, and that's the last bit that we got.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to like the last quarter of the season, where it starts to get nasty, or not nasty, but it's going to start to get tense. That's what I would say.
If you look at the average, if you think about it, so we're a third of the way through the season, there's only 10 points that separates them. So if they stick to that kind of rhythm, like you're saying, it could be 2-3 races to go, and there's only a race win in it. And then that's perhaps when we might start to see elbows coming out, and people daring to dive and make moves that they wouldn't usually, perhaps. And actually, but to commend Lando Norris and his racecraft this weekend. Although he lost out on the first corner to Max Verstappen, and I think Nico Rosberg mentioned it on the broadcast, it was sensible because if you have that collision with Max, you've killed any opportunity for points. So I don't want to be pitching Lando as a bottle job or anything like you said. There's also racecraft involved, isn't there, when you are battling for a championship like this?
Yeah, very much so. You've got to look at it as a long game, because if you look at it in the short term and react on something in the heat of the moment, if you're trying to defend something, you're having to play chess with it. It's going to be ridiculous to try and make a move on something so early on in the season when you're ahead of Max. Lando is still ahead of Max to then make a silly move to just get ahead of him in that one moment where you've clearly got the faster car is silly. So it's good to see that Norris is matured like that.
But then we've got the wild card of Max Verstappen, and we've seen with the incident this week that he's willing to make his point and throw his weight around in any shape or form. And we'll get in a little later about the point that he's only one penalty point away now from a race ban, the 4-time world champion. But Gary's saying as well, Henry, that he doesn't think Lando has the aggression to fight it out with Oscar, and he doesn't think it will go to the end of the season. And that's why we love this season, because it isn't like it was last year. 7 from the first 9 that Max Verstappen run, and it won, and it was just like, oh, what's the point? Where's the competition? Now we've all got a different opinion on how it's going to play out. And like you mentioned with the regulation change, the fact that it is changing, but we've managed to converge this grid to almost the perfect point of entertainment, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure if I would agree with Gary on that, but I understand what Gary was saying in that point about having the aggression, because you could see Lando with Max at the end of last year, in places like Austin, where he wasn't reading Max particularly well, and he made like a couple of moves that you wouldn't necessarily have done even in Mario Kart. But I think there's going to come a point where Lando will realise that there is a genuine opportunity here, and I think there is going to be a big rally round, especially by Zach Brown, to go, listen, dude, I've been with you since the start and I'm really rooting for you. Come on. I think, we like to think that team principals don't necessarily have like a favourite, but they're probably going to have a favourite, aren't they? And I think with the longevity that Lando has been at McLaren, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Zach genuinely, in the heart of his hearts, preferred Lando over Oscar.
Yeah, and I know that I read an article saying that even financially, the Norrises have been very supportive of that McLaren outfit. So I imagine there's always been a lot of positive energy poured towards Lando Norris. But listen, Henry, the insight's brilliant, but I'm very aware that the time is cracking on and we're more than halfway through the show. We've only done 2 teams. So let's push it forward.
We're good.
And talk about Ferrari, the Scuderia, and how their weekend panned out. The biggest takeaway for me, and I'd love to get your opinions on it, is still the performance of the car, and that both drivers are not shy of vocalizing it. So Lewis just saying there's no positives to take from the weekend, and that the car's so difficult to drive. Charles Leclerc in the driver's room after the race was just asking the McLaren boys about their balance, and he just said his was just completely thrown on the 3rd stint. That really is a difficult car for both of these experienced drivers to drive. How much pressure does that put on Fred Vasseur?
I've spoken to a few people about this, and I think it is an attitude problem with Ferrari. I don't think it's necessarily the thing that's like wrong with Fred or wrong with the car per se, but even though those are like big, enormous factors, I think the attitudes towards how the drivers are being treated, not like mistreated, but the Ferrari way is the Ferrari way, and you will listen to what we say. You will not deviate from our plan because we know best. Clearly, you don't. Clearly, things have not been doing well because you haven't won a championship since 2007.
Yeah.
You know, buck your games up. This is no longer a place where you can kind of float about and proclaim that, you know, we're always going to be brilliant and we're always going to be support, because yes, you are always going to have support. But these teams have come on leaps and bounds since your dominant years, which was, 20 years ago. It's a long time. It's, even though Charles got a podium, Lewis was left a little bit hung out to dry with the safety car because he remained on the older softs, and he's had the continuous difficulties with his race engineer Ricardo. It seems to be a bit like there needs to be a short, sharp shock at that team to be like, come on, get a grip. Okay, They might be P2 in the constructors. Yes, Haas are P2 in the constructors, but we're also not kind of kidding ourselves.
Yeah, I wanted to pick that up with Gary's point, saying it was a better weekend for them. P2 in the constructors, all right, the podium was fortuitous with what happened with Max Verstappen. But Fred Vasseur, in post-race comments, even made the point. He said, whatever's being said and the story the media want to make, that Lewis was in front of the Mercedes for 45 laps, and it was only once he had a problem with the car that he wasn't in front of them. Is the pressure getting to Fred? Are we feeling a different character in the media pen and in press conferences? And does that pressure come from particular rumours that we're hearing about the likes of Christian Horner? What's your opinions on that?
I think we're seeing a very different character from Fred. We're very used to seeing Fred being bubbly and laughing and joking, and I'm sure he is still kind of like that. But it does definitely seem to be that the Ferrari pressure. I wonder if it's just really weighing on his shoulders now because they're not getting what they wanted. There was a big expectation at the beginning of this year with Lewis coming in that they were going to sail off into the sunset and it was going to be this wonderful, glorious rebirth of Ferrari. And it kind of hasn't been. It is still earlier in the season, so, I will hold my hands up if I'm completely wrong about this. And all of a sudden, Ferrari are going to be 1-2ing every single race, but I can't see it. And I feel like there needs to be a big change in Ferrari to make the changes, to make the steps that they want. I don't think it's all well and good them kind of staying in the same sort of mentality that they have had for decades. I think they need a complete change. But I think Lewis is going to be the person to do it because he probably isn't afraid to stick his neck out and go, no, you're wrong. Look what I did at Mercedes. That team was in the doghouse for a couple of years. I came along. Hello. 8 championships on the trot.
Nothing to do with the regs change, though. The new hybrid engine that they'd worked on. That was Lewis. Listen, Henry, Gary, though, again, he's coming back to this point about Christian Horner and the rumour. Rumour mill for you or anything in it? And could you ever see Christian Horner conducting Lewis Hamilton? That's the thing that didn't sit right with me. I was thinking, I'm not sure about that.
I can't see it. I just can't see it. And listening to the Sky Sports F1 podcast this morning, and they're saying, no, it's complete baloney. I think it would be farcical to drop Fred after 2 years. He's been with the team.
This is third,
and I know,
this is third
season. Yeah. So he's been with them for 2 years, and this is his third season. To drop him that quickly, I think, would be a mistake. I don't think Christian wants it because he's got too much pride in a team that he built. And I don't think that the relationship between Christian and Lewis would be all that good, considering the recent history that we've had.
Yeah,
with
Gary's,
the Red Bulls and Lewis Hamilton. I just can't say it.
Gary's throwing in again, just saying that Ferrari not tapping into Hamilton's knowledge and experience. And yeah, we've mentioned on this show before that you have basically one of the best consultants in Formula One history there, who can look across your whole organisation to make a difference. Ewan, hold on to that comment about Nico Hulkenberg, because we're going to come on to Sauber's performance in a little while. That P5 for Nico Hulkenberg, really pretty much the story of the day. So we will get to that, Ewan, and get into the talents of Nico Hulkenberg in a little while. But I just want to throw the attention now towards Mercedes and their performance across the weekend. George Russell, just outside the podium positions, but another solid race weekend for him, even after that difficult start to the race. And then, of course, the big scandal in the Grand Prix is this incident with Max Verstappen. What did you make of the incident with Max Verstappen? And perhaps as well, how aggressive George was in the incident that led to that incident. What did you think, Henry?
Well, I think that Max was being a big old silly Billy, and he just needed to kind of take himself away from that moment, to just chill out just a little bit. Clearly being frustrated by an order that he felt that was wrong and turned out to be wrong to give the position to George. He didn't need to do that. Reacted poorly, probably a bit on instinct. We've not seen the telemetry as to whether or not he actually put his foot on the accelerator or he just let off the brake.
Well, have you seen the angle from his cockpit?
George, I think, handed it.
What he didn't do, he didn't drive towards Russell. Quite cleverly, he just didn't steer towards the corner.
Yeah, which is, one of those things that Max is very good at. He's very good at understanding a moment where if something's going to go wrong, I don't want to look at fault. Like we think back to Austria last year with Lando, where he was turning into that right-hander. He was putting his steering input in such a way that he was effectively kind of overshooting the corner, but he wasn't moving under braking. So Max clearly knows what he's doing when it comes to strategic moves that could benefit him. But it didn't end up that way, and he was a silly boy, and he deserved that. He deserved that penalty, quite frankly. I don't think there was any other way that could have gone.
And George Russell generally across the season, I think. What have you made of George so far this season, Henry? And the fact that there's still been no announcement about this contract, has there?
George has done, I think, an exceptional job, and I think he's shown like a great level of maturity. I was a little bit worried when he left Williams that he was going to be a little bit too big-headed, and you could potentially argue that. But George has been really good. Okay, he can be a little bit cringy at time to time, but I think that kind of plays into it a little bit because that ends up being a selling point where George will do something a bit silly, but he'll also be kind of like charming and suave. But I know there's quite a lot of people who are probably going to be disagreeing with me. But I don't mind George.
Where do you see him racing next
year? And it's a shame. Where do I see him? I see him in Mercedes. I don't see him moving. Again, like with Lando, I think his loyalty is strong.
So why has there been
the only other place?
Why no announcement yet then, in your opinion?
Well, Mercedes did it last year with Antonelli, didn't they? They held off and held off and held off and held off. And admittedly, I've not seen the Seat documentary on Netflix. But I think they know that they're going to be quite comfortable, and I wonder if like Carlos Sainz last year, they're waiting to see what Max does, because if Max jumps ship completely out of Formula One, they can kind of go, well, we know that that's not going to be happening for anyone else. So we don't have to worry. George, you stay here. You know that this is going to be working out for you. We've got new regs, new engine. We're looking the best so far. But if Max decides that he wants to be out of Red Bull, but where he goes hasn't been announced, I think George looks to somewhere like Aston Martin because it plays into George's image and the sort of person that he wants to come across of. But they're also going to be still the Mercedes engine and with Adrian Newey. I think if there is going to be anywhere, George is going to go, it would go to Aston Martin. Oh, no, they're not going to be, sorry, not Mercedes, Honda, but with Adrian Newey.
Yeah, I like that. I see it. That opinion is like the quintessentially English. You could imagine, I don't know, George Russell with his Aston Martin, and then also, I don't know, teaming up with Marks and Spencers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Waitrose and Browns and Harrods. All of those like really typical English things, yeah.
Henry, so just, I know we've already started to delve into him, but Max Verstappen at Red Bull, we talked about the incident already and just saying, it was an incident he was very much at fault for and the frustrations getting the better of him. Just talking about the Red Bull team performance across the weekend, I think, do we have to commend them first for trying something a little bit different to try and catch McLaren out with a different tyre strategy? But then why did they get those calls so wrong, do you think, during the safety car, putting the hard tyre on and then also recapping the incident? Do you think there was a little bit of paranoia that the previous couple of times where they haven't given the place back, they paid the price?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they don't want to risk extra penalty points on their part. So I think the team made a call that was right for them in the moment, but they weren't going to take into account how Max was going to react towards George. So and I don't know if they should have done, but perhaps that's something that they're going to have to take into account in the future. What is Max going to do if it is him and George? I think that it's obviously been a bit of a bitter pill to swallow this weekend on how things went. Yuki obviously, his setup was he had the Imola's floor. He wasn't running a higher spec as Max. Yeah.
Gary's asking, is Yuki's position under threat now for you, Henry? Why is he not coming to the party as expected? But then saying that we expected that of Lawson, we expected that of Perez to an extent. Where does that leave Yuki?
I mean, my opinion is that people have speculated that the car is suited to Max and that second Red Bull seat is cursed. And I completely agree. But I don't think it's because it is a cursed seat. I think it is because that car, despite all of the denials and they're refusing to accept that this car is tailored towards Max, is, from my perspective, complete and utter rubbish. Of course, the car is designed well towards Max, and he's got a unique driving. It seems to be that he's got a unique driving style as opposed to the rest of the grid. But that's probably why he's so good, because he can just go on it. But other drivers need a little bit more leniency with the car. So I think you can put anybody in there, and I think they're gonna have a tough time with it, unless they are the guys in the other top teams, like Lando, like Oscar, like Charles. I don't think anybody else is going to be having a fun time with that seat. There is an opinion of mine that I'm not going to wear, but it relates to Yuki and Helmut Marko, and I have an opinion as to why I don't think Yuki got that seat in the first place. But I will leave that there for pure speculation and a little bit of clickbait.
All right, so you're not going to actually divulge. We'll have to try and draw it out of you from a piece of content via TikTok, etc., as the season continues. But I'm going to push it forwards because, again, time is of the essence between us, Henry, and I'm very much aware you got an early start in the morning.
Don't worry about it.
Story of the day. big points for Kick Stake Sauber. No one saw that coming, let's be honest, and particularly from Nico Hulkenberg, who started the race in P16, and his teammate Gabriel Bortoleto had his most solid race, I guess we can say, or race weekend with his best qualifying, and then also coming home in P12. The young man, has had a difficult start to the season. But how did Nico Hulkenberg pull that off? Because I was looking even at the pit stops and thinking he's not gone for a 3-stop. He did a 2, but then just pitted when everybody else did on the safety car. How did he make his way through the grid like that?
Well, he clearly had an advantage, starting in P15. He had more options for more tires. In fact, I'm gonna put this on because this is signed by right there. It's signed by Nico. No. So I'm gonna pop this on my head.
Nice.
He clearly was on a mission and seems to be kind of a bit empowered by this update, whatever it's brought to the Sauber. He's one of these drivers, and I tell you what, it's like you see your ex out in public and you feel like a little bit kind of about it, and then see them like with like a more handsome partner.
Okay.
That's kind of how that felt, that race, to see Nico overtake Hamilton and get P5 in a Sauber. I was like, what
for you? Are we saying? What for you? You was like, oh my god, what I'd give to okay.
Just a little bit, just to see Nico. You're always going to be a part of the Haas family, but you didn't have to do that. Come on, give us a bit of a break.
Yeah, and I imagine there was many Lewis Hamilton fans out there that felt extremely frustrated, just as the 7-time world champion did, that he was being overtaken by a lime green car. But let's return to the comment from Ewan a little earlier, saying Nico Hulkenberg, a very underrated driver. Gary saying he had an awesome drive. Why perhaps for you, Henry, has the Hulk's junior career not transitioned as so into the world of Formula One? Because I know some of his records in the junior categories equal some of the best ever, the likes of like Hamilton and Rosberg, etc., but never a race win or a podium from Nico, unfortunately.
No, I think it's been a thing of pure chance. It's been one of those things that I think, unfortunately, fate has not thrown him a bone. Where Lando hadn't won for a long time, and it was only in Miami last year that he won his first race, and everybody was kind of expecting Lando to have had a win by now. I think it's of a similar situation where Nico has been in advantageous situations that have then turned sour quite quickly. Like when he was with Renault, he had that moment where he was in the podium and then it just lost it underneath him off into the gravel. I think it's just been pure chance, unfortunately. There was a moment in Canada last year where I thought, oh my God, this is the best opportunity we've ever had. Where everyone else was on intermediates and we were on wets, and K-Mag and Nico were sailing through the pack. I thought that was going to be a good opportunity, but then pit stops fumbled and the rain dried up. Nico is an incredibly exceptional and very capable driver. I think that has just been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and we'll see how he does for the rest of this year and going into early for next year.
So Gary's just saying that Hulk, the driver of the day, or Isaac Hadjar. And let's push it forwards, looking at the Racing Bulls. Isaac Hadjar again scoring points, 3 back-to-back points finishes now for the young man, 5 in total. Did you see that coming after his start to the season, Henry? And what have you made of the young man and the conversations around, should he now be in the Red Bull second seat?
He should absolutely not go to Red Bull. Absolutely not. He needs to just get himself comfortable within the sport. He is my rookie of the year so far. And I love Ollie Behrman, obviously. But Isaac Hadjar has just completely taken, I think, everybody by surprise. A lot of my friends were thinking when he came from F2 that he was going to be the person to DNF the most. And look where he is, within the top 10 quite comfortably. He's been outperforming his teammates. He's been putting himself into a really strong position every single time. He's not putting a foot wrong. Okay, he had that moment in Australia, but I think everybody, if you were to watch that now and then see him, to where he is, just too good. And I think it would be very foolish to put him in the second Red Bull seat, because it's gonna cripple his career.
He was kind of a wild card, wasn't he, at Racing Bulls even? I don't believe he won any junior championships across his whole career, was one of the last drivers to be announced to complete the grid for 2025. But like you said, has been going quietly about his business. And I would say under the spotlight, but I think all the spotlight was on him after what happened in Australia. But testament to the young man and the character he is, particularly within that tough love Red Bull family, that he has bounced back. But I just want to push it forwards now, Henry, and talk about Alpine real quick. Pierre Gasly putting more points on the board for the French outfit, but unfortunately, they find themselves bottom of the constructors now, the French outfit, which won't make positive liking for Flavio Briatore, as you said. Do they perhaps need to work on someone pushing Gasly in that second seat? I almost feel it's a bit like what Albon went through for a couple of years at Williams. That's how the vibe feels there at the moment.
I have a strong feeling that Alpine really need to get, again, I think, again, like Ferrari, I think they need to get a grip on the attitude sort of situation. That outfit, I feel like the upper management stinks of ego. And I think you can have ego to a certain point. But when you're chopping and changing your opinions every 30 seconds, or your team is putting out a press release that Colapinto is only in for 5 races, and then your team principal, come on, he is the team principal. Let's not beat around the bush. When he says, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about," no, I never said that, but the team released it. Just do something with yourselves that isn't quite so chaotic. It's very frustrating because this team have been here for a long time, and they've had great success, unfortunately, under Flavio Briatore. But I think he's come back and think, "Oh yeah, I can just kind of stroll around and do this sort of thing, and it's all great, and everybody loves me." And I'm like, look at what you're doing. Just chill out a bit, regroup, do some changes somewhere else. Don't just keep chopping and changing your lineup. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get the consistency.
Yeah, and maybe there's a lot of pressure in and around the whole organisation now because Briatore's come back, as you said. But we know that F1 evolves so quickly. So even if you did have success in the late 90s and early mid-noughties, it's a very different arena now in 2025, isn't it? And the last point scorers of the Spanish Grand Prix weekend, Aston Martin. I don't think there'll be a Formula One fan in the world, Henry, who wasn't happy to see Fernando score some points finally. Do you think he has just been unlucky so far this season, or do you think it's down to the car and is he slightly losing it at 43, 44? What's your thoughts?
I'm not sure if he is slightly. I mean, that may be a factor. I don't think that's the main factor, though. I just think the car's crap. It's not I don't think it's a situation that Fernando Alonso, this driver, this very well acclaimed personality within the world of motorsport that has been driving so well, 2 world championships to his name, has all of a sudden just like lost it overnight. I don't think that's going to be part of his work ethic, that he just wouldn't bother to turn up or show up and put his best in. I think it's been the car. I think it's been the approach of how Aston Martin as an organisation kind of approach motorsport in this sphere. Because everything you can buy the most expensive wind tunnel in the world. You can have the most nice facilities, but unless you've got a team that is coherent and that is capable of working together, looking at you, Lance Stroll, for kind of gelling with the team at all situations, then I think they're on a downward trajectory. And there's been some rumours about Lawrence Stroll selling up or selling his shares. So it's good to see Alonso in the points. It's brilliant because I think we all love the fact now he's a bit older, he's a bit sillier. I think there's like a humour I think that we can all appreciate there. But I think they just need to understand where they are and kind of take smaller steps instead of big ones that then don't get them anywhere. And I think that's what's happened this year, that they've taken too big a step and it's just not worked.
Gary echoing, just saying it's good to see Alonso get points, but also then just delving into the Lance Stroll stuff. And just the final question really for you, Henry. How do you think that's going to play out, this Lance Stroll scenario? We're hearing he's had another procedure on his wrist that dates back to the injury at was it the pre-season of 2024? I think it was, or 23, one of the two. And can you see, who do you see in that second seat with the likes of Felipe Drugovich and Valtteri Bottas around? Or do you think that Lance will be back in there?
I don't see Lance getting back in there. I think Felipe has made it. I think he's made it publicly known that he's actually quite keen on prioritising Formula One over Le Mans because he has a contract with Aston Martin, and even though he's going to be with Cadillac for Le Mans, I think he's got a choice of choosing either or. I can't see Lance going in. I think they're going to have to medically restrict him, even if he might like kick and stamp. And apparently this wasn't a situation where he like punched a wall or something, even though he's been known to do that in the past. As far as I'm aware, that's not what happened.
As well, Gary's just made the point. Next up is his home race, isn't it? The Stroll's home race.
Yeah. I just don't see it. It's too short a time span. You saw how difficult it was for him to race in Bahrain of 2024. I think the fact that they had been monitoring it for 6 weeks and reviewing it, and then have now made this decision that he wasn't going to race. Poor foresight from the team, and maybe it should have been more in Lance Stroll's mind to maybe put his own well-being before the money, which is hard to do. But if he's somebody who's not necessarily having to think about quite so much the amount of money he's got available to him, then maybe you should have just done it from the start. So I think it's going to be Felipe jumping in. I don't see Lance back for another 3 races, including the Canadian GP.
Yeah, and who knows if we have a good performance from Felipe Drugovich, who has been waiting in the wings for, is it 3 seasons?
Ages.
Now? Yeah.
A long time. Yeah.
He won 2022, I think he won the F2 championship.
Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's time. We need to see whether he is just a guy who's hanging around in F1 garages, or does he have the potential to actually race in the world of F1? And just final thoughts, and I guess it's testament to how far they've come, Henry. The Williams will be very disappointed that they've had a non-point scoring weekend. And in fact, it's just appeared to me they're the only team that didn't score any points this race weekend. Oh, no, and yours. Yeah, sorry. I was looking at the order. Yeah, my bad. So, and yours. Your team and Williams.
It's been fun, James. Definitely disappointing for them, but I think they can definitely look upon this year as a, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this sort of thing. They are absolutely storming into securing P5. And it's really good to see for the sport, because they are obviously a heritage team, and they've got a very strong driver lineup that is very well regarded, both for Alex and for Carlos and for James Vowles. It's definitely testament to the amount of work and the vision that James has for the team. Whether or not this is going to last for the entire season, because as I said earlier, that there is a chance that they're going to stop the development of this car and focus on 26 soon. I don't know when that's going to be, but I mean, good on them. They recovered as much as they possibly could. I did find it funny, though, that in quali, Alex was complaining about a Haas going slow, considering that the weekend before was in Monaco, and we all know exactly what was going on with Williams and their pace
during
in
the
Monaco.
race, not so qualifying, during the race as well. Brilliant stuff, and a very good point.
Alex, just don't,
Yeah, I get it. And
don't bite off your nose to spite your face,
Henry, and the fact that those are shots fired at a team that are going to be very much in contention with your own outfit, Haas, which is lovely to see. That's exactly what we want, don't we? We want that competitive field, and it is delivering for the 2025 season in the world of Formula One. But listen, we are over our hour, Henry. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. And have you enjoyed yourself? I guess is the long and short of it.
Oh, mate, it's been great. You know, there was a little bit of struggling to try and get this evening to work, but thankfully it has. Hopefully my internet hasn't been too horrendous. This is the first time I'm actually doing something like a live show in this setting. No, it's been a real pleasure. And if there's ever an opportunity again, hit me up, because I'm down for it.
Buddy, you've been absolutely brilliant. Your insights have been really knowledgeable as well, and that's what we appreciate. And as much as this was me trying out new things, I also wanted to create this platform so that the likes of yourself, as content creators and influencers, could also begin to spread your wings into new environments so that you can make the most of opportunities as they come your way. But for you guys out there, if you aren't already, make sure that you follow Henry across the socials at the Haas Chat. His content is brilliant, and he's always in and around lots of different Formula One activations that are happening around the UK and Grand Prix weekends, etc. He's got lots of Haas memorabilia, as you can see. I'm not sure if there's opportunities to win some of it at particular times, but the only way you'll find out is if you go and follow him across the socials. So make sure you do it at the Haas Chat. And as well as that, make sure you like and subscribe our content, share it far and wide as we clip it up and post it across the rest of this week. Some of the little nuggets of gold from Henry, and hopefully we will see you again soon here at Fans Forum for the next race, which is Canada. As we mentioned, the Strolls home race. We've got this weekend off, but then after that, all eyes on Montreal for that one. But for now, thanks so much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you again soon.